Masechet Zevaḥim Daf Chavtet Tenor Rabbanan Ve'im he'achol yachel mibesar zebach shel amav Amar Rabbi Eliezer Kof oznecha lishmoa bimchashev le'echol mizivcho bayom hashlishi hakatub medaber O eno ela be'ochel mizivcho leyom shlishi Amarta achar shehu kasher yachzor v'yipasel. A Baraita is analyzing this same pasuk that we've been analyzing on the previous daf. If you read it simply, it sounds like it's talking about someone who actually eats notar. It's talking about a korban shelamim, and it says if someone should eat from besar zevach shelamav, korban shelamim, on the third day, you can eat it on the first day or the second day, but not the third day, then it will not be acceptable. The person who offers it will not be counted. So the Gemara is going, this Baraita is going to discuss the Makrivoto, that's talking about the Kohen. Lo Yachasheb, is that talking about the Kohen or the Korban? Lo Yaratzeh is talking about the Korban clearly. So that's going to an ambiguity that we'll have to figure out. Lo Yachasheb lo will not be counted for him. Well, that actually might be the owner if you take it with law. Or lo yachashev by itself can mean without improper thought. Okay, this is going to be subject to a number of interpretations. Pigul v'nefesh achad menna memenu avona tisa. So a simple reading of this pasuk is talking about someone who eats notar, someone who eats a korban shelamim on the third day. Well, then the korban will be no good and will get a sin, and so on. However, Rabbi Eliezer says, no, come, incline your ear and listen to the following argument, that this is talking about someone who has intention to eat it on the third day, but this is happening on the first day while he's doing shechita or one of the other major activities on the first day with intention to eat it on the third day. That's what it's talking about. Now, why would you say that? Maybe not. Maybe it's talking about someone who actually eats it on the third day. No, you can't say that because that would be impossible. After it's already valid, on the first day you do all four of the blood services properly. Sprinkle the blood, now it counts. The person who brought it achieves atonement, fulfills their obligation. Now you're going to tell me that 2 days later, the Kohen eats it. Now, all of a sudden, retroactively, you're going to say it's not good? Halakha doesn't work like that. Once something is valid, good, you go home, you fulfilled your obligation, you promised to bring a neder, you brought this animal, we offered it, we sprinkled the blood, okay, now you're done, you can go home. Where do you ever see a situation where we said you were done, we did everything correctly, and then 2 days later, because someone does something wrong, now retroactively you're going to tell the person, oh, that korban that we told you was okay, now is not okay. That's impossible. So this is a pretty good reading of the pasuk. It makes a lot of sense. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva hen, and Rabbi Akiva disagrees and says we do find places on halacha where a status can change retroactively. Masinu bezav v'zava v'shomeret yom keneged yom shen becheskat tahora v'chevan shera'u satru. We have an example of a zava. Let's take the example of Shomeret Yom Keneged Yom. This is a woman who sees blood not during the normal time when she's expecting it, and she sees blood for 1 day. In that case, she has to wait 1 day, corresponding to the 1 day that she saw blood. It would be true also if she saw blood for 2 days straight. Then the third day she has to check. If she sees 3 days in a row, then she's a Zavah Gedolah. But let's say she doesn't. So let's go back to a simple example. She sees blood on Monday, and it's not during the time of her period. So then she'll be tameh at that point. And then Tuesday, she has to check to make sure she doesn't have blood again. She can go to the mikveh during that day. On the rest of that day, we have a presumption that she is tahor because she went to the mikveh. She only saw blood one day, so she's okay. Now, we can presume that whatever she touches, everything she does, is tahor that day. However, if later in the day she does see blood, then retroactively we say, oh, everything that you touched today retroactively is tameh. And that immersion that you did in the morning doesn't count for anything because now you saw blood 2 days in a row. You're going to have to check the next day. Afata al titma al zeh shaf al pi shurshad she'echzod ve'yipasel. So too, this could be a case in this korban where Yes, the first day, you take this korban shelamim. You do all the blood services. Everything is good. We say, chazak ubaruch, you fulfilled your obligation. However, if 2 days later someone eats it, then we say, oh, wait, retroactively, it's no good. Yes, we do have such a thing in halacha, and therefore, Rabbi Akiva does not think that this is a good proof. Amar le. However, Rabbi Eliezer has a comeback. Hareu omer ham makriv b'shat hakravahu nifsal ve'eno nifsal b'shilishi. The pasuk says, the one who offers it, meaning that it's going to become pasul, pigul, at the time that it's offered, on that day. And the act of offering it, and the act of doing shechita, with intention that one will eat it on the third day, that's when the pigul takes effect, and not on the third day retroactively. So that's his response. So yes, there is such a thing in halacha that sometimes things work retroactively, but it can't work here because it says hamakriv. Or maybe you'll say hamakriv is not referring to the time of hakrava. Maybe hamakriv is referring to the kohen himself. Here's the pasuk again. Hamakriv oto lo yachasheb lo. The one who offers it will not be attributed. It will not be attributed to him. So actually, a simple reading is in fact talking about a person, maybe the owner or maybe the kohen. But Rabbi Eliezer says no. Hamakriv is referring to the time of the hakrava, and it's not referring to the person. Do you think it's referring to the kohen who's doing it? That maybe you'll say that if the kohen does something, then he does something wrong like this, then the kohen himself will be disqualified. Maybe if he has wrong intention and causes the korban to be disqualified, maybe the kohen also becomes disqualified. But you can't read it that way. Keshu omer oto, bezevach umedaber, ve'eno medaber ba'kohen. When it says the word oto, well, the word oto is referring to the makriv oto, is referring to the korban, and therefore, and not referring to the kohen, and therefore, hamakrib is also not referring to the kohen, but rather to the korban itself. So what does that mean? Hamakriv? It means at the time, hamakriv, of when that verb is happening, when the hakrava is happening, that's when the pesul happens, and therefore cannot be talking about a person who actually eats notad. That we saw as a separate pasuk. We learned that elsewhere. That's also prohibited. But this pasuk here is something that happens not retroactively, but at the time of the hakrava, and therefore it must be referring to intention to eat it outside the time. Ben Azai Omer, Oto Matamud Omar. Now they're focusing on the word Oto. Ben Azai learned something else from this. Lefi shene'emar, Lo ta'achel l'shalemo, Yachol af me'acher nidro belo yeraseh. Tamud Omar, Oto belo yeraseh, ve'en ha'me'acher nidro belo yeraseh. Because another pasuk in Devarim says that if you make a vow, you should not delay in paying it. And from this we learn the law of lo te'acher. If you make a vow that I'm going to bring a korban, you have to give it within 3 holidays. Whichever 3 holidays come up next, then you're supposed to give it before then. Now, what if you don't? I might have thought that someone who delays offering a korban that he promised to bring, maybe also it will become disqualified. Is that true? No, it's not true, because here in this pasuk in Vayikra, it says oto, a pigul, improper thought, that makes the korban disqualified, but only this. It's a limiting word, and not someone who delays it. Although you're not supposed to delay it, if you did delay it, still that korban can be offered. Acherim omerim lo yechashev b'machshava hu nifsal ve'eno nifsal b'shilishi. Okay, so that concludes what Ben Azai does with the word oto. But now we go back to the main argument. How do we know that this pasuk in Vayikra 7 is talking about pigul, meaning machshava, outside of zman, and not someone actually eating it? So we saw Rabbi Eliezer's answer, but now there's another answer. Acherim omerim lo yechashev b'machshava hu nifsal ve'eno nifsal b'shilishi. Because the pasuk says without thought, literally it means it will not be credited to him. But since it uses the word yechashev here, because it also says lo yeraseh. So what is this lo yechashev? It's coming to teach us that it becomes disqualified through thought. meaning through intention to eat it at the wrong time. And so, b'machshavo nifsal, that means at the time of the first day, when you're doing shechita or kabbalah, and you have in mind, I'm going to eat it on the third day. That's what makes it disqualified. It makes it pigul, but not this pasuk is not talking about something that happens on the third day, meaning eating it on the third day, which is a prohibition of notar, which is karet, but does not retroactively go and make it no good. So that's how Achirim learn it, from the word lo yechasheb, so different from Rabbi Eliezer's derivation. Ben Azai, bezevaḥ hakatuv medaber ve'eno bekohen minaleh. Now back to Ben Azai. You'll see why we had to quote Achirim first before we ask a question on Ben Azai. Ben Azai over here said, the word oto is referring to the korban, that the korban is no good, and it's making it's limiting this disqualification to pigul and not to lo te'acher. But in any case, it's referring to the korban and not to the kohen. So Ben Azai said that since he said that this pasuk is talking about the korban and not the kohen, so how does he know that? Maybe it is talking about the kohen. And there's two answers. One answer is maybe he learned it from the same way that Achirim did. In other words, Ben Azai doesn't necessarily agree with Rabbi Eliezer's derivation. He can agree with the derivation of Achirim. And since lo yechasheb is talking about the korban is not going to be good because it had improper thought. So therefore, the word oto, which is right next to it, lo yechasheb, makrib oto, lo yechasheb. So therefore, oto is also referring to the korban and not the kohen. Or another answer, but since in the same pasuk it says it will not be accepted, that language elsewhere also, and here generally refers to the offering being disqualified. You don't talk about a kohen saying lo yeratzeh, that the kohen is not accepted. That's not the way the word is applied. And so since the rest of the pasuk says lo yeratzeh, therefore the word oto here also is referring to a disqualification of the korban and not the kohen. Ben Azai, oto belo yiraseh ve'en me'acher nidro belo yiraseh me'hacha nafka. Now Ben Azai, who used the word oto to teach us that pigul will not be accepted, but if you delay a korban after 3 holidays, then that does not apply. It is still acceptable. And so the word oto is coming to teach us that a me'acher is still acceptable. Is that derivation really from here, from this word, from this pasuk in Vayikra 7? Me'acherim nafka. We have another derivation of this in the name of Achirim, which is in the next paraita. The Tanya, Achirim omrim yachol yeh bechor she'ibera shenato kifsula muktashin v'yipasel. Achirim teach. You might think that a bechor, that the year passed, when a bechor animal is born, the farmer is supposed to give it to the kohen, and it should be sacrificed within 1 year. Lechatechila, it should be. Now, what if a year passed? You might think it's like a disqualified, consecrated animal, and it's not, and then you cannot offer it anymore. It's like a blemish, and you can't make it a sacrifice. You might think that if it's after a year. Talmud lomar ve'achalta lifnei Hashem elokecha ma'asar deganecha makish bechor le'ma'aser ma ma'aser eno nifsal mishana lechaverta af bechor eno nifsal mishana lechaverta. Therefore, the pasuk says that you should eat it before Hashem, what you should eat there, your grain, the tithe of your grain, your wine, your oil, and the firstborn of your herds and of your flocks. So you see in the pasuk, it puts back to back Maaser and Bechor to teach me that just like Maaser does not become disqualified from 1 year to the next, if I didn't give my Maaser to the Levi this year, I can still give it next year. So too, Bechor, although I'm supposed to offer it and sacrifice it in the first year, if not, still it doesn't become disqualified. One can still bring it late. You violate that mitzvah, but you can still bring it late. And so, since just like Bechor, lo te'acher does not make it disqualified, so too can't we learn that other animals also, although you're supposed to do it within 3 festivals, if you didn't, it's still okay. So I have a derivation already from Bechor, as Achirim say. So how come Ben Azai says I learned it from this pasuk and the word oto? Why do I need this pasuk if I learn it from Bechor? And the answer is istirich sakada techamina hanemile Bechor de la bar harsa'ahu aval kodashim de bnei harsa'aninhu ema la lirsu kamash malan. No, if I only had the derivation of achirim from Bechor, I might think that this only applies to a Bechor, that if you delayed in bringing it, you can still sacrifice it, because a Bechor is not necessary for acceptance. It doesn't atone for anything. It's not a obligation of the person that he promised something or sinned and therefore has to bring it. Rather, it's just the Bechor was born, has to be brought. Okay, you didn't bring it 1 year? All right, let it be brought afterwards. But I cannot learn from there regarding other sacrifices where they need to be accepted. They need to atone for something or fulfill an obligation. There, it's more serious. I might think that if it's delayed, then it cannot be brought at all. And that's why Ben Azai has to teach me this derivation from Oto, that even for all other sacrifices also, if you delay it, it's still qualified. V'akati mehatam nafka v'haya bechachet v'lo bekorban chachet. Wait a second. Even I still don't need the word oto to teach me this law, because I can learn it from yet another place, from this braita that says, quoting Devarim, when you pay a vow, you shall do not delay in paying it. And the continuation of the pasuk says, and it will be a sin in you. Now, if you delay it, it will be a sin. That means that the sin is in you and the person. You promised to bring it, and you delayed, so you get the sin. You get the sin, but not the korban. The korban is not going to be disqualified. So I can learn from here regarding all other korbanot, not only a bechor, that if it's delayed, it's still a kosher korban. So why do I need oto? Uben azai hahu mi ba'eleh. Ben Azai says, no, I need this pasuk for something else, to teach me that, not when it says that you will get the sin. The inference is not, and the animal won't get the sin, because I need this for a different inference, that you get the sin and not one's wife. Why would you think that a wife would get the sin if you delay in paying your korban? Because here's why I would have thought that. Sakat etechamina ho'il ve'amar Rabbi Elazar v'itemar Rabbi Yochanan en ishto shel adam meta ela im ken mebakshin menu mamon ve'en lo shene'emar im en lecha leshalem lama yikach mishkabecha mitachtecha v'ha'avon de bal te'acher nami meta kamashma lam. I might have thought that the wife would be punished, because there's a statement by Rabbi Elazar, or some say Rabbi Yochanan, and he says that a wife of a person dies only because, it doesn't mean literally only when you have this kind of phrase, and ella, but it means one possibility that one's wife will die prematurely is if someone asks him for money and he doesn't have. He stole something or owes an obligation, he owes a loan, and he doesn't have it, what to pay. Then the punishment goes to the wife. Why? Because the pasuk says in Mishleh, if you don't have enough to pay something that you owe, why should he take mishkabecha? A simple reading is your bed. Collectors will come and they'll take your bed, they'll take your furniture, they'll take your house. So, but the word mishkabecha can also mean one's wife that he lies with. And so that's how they're reading it, that one's wife will die for his inability to pay or paying late. So I might have thought that the same logic would also apply to someone who offers, who promises a sacrifice and doesn't bring it on time, that the wife will be punished for that. That's why the pasuk says that you will get the sin and not his wife. That's why I learned from that pasuk, and I don't learn from the pasuk and not the korban. So I don't know anything about the korban status from this pasuk, and that's why, according to Ben Azai, we need the word oto to say not only bechor, but every animal that if you are supposed to give it within a certain time, within 3 festivals, and you delay, it's still okay, because oto says only pigul becomes the disqualified, but a delayed sacrifice does not become disqualified. Acherim omerim, b'machshava hu nifsal ve'no nifsal b'shelishi. Now back in the Braita, Acherim learned from the word lo yechashev that this type of korban in this pasuk becomes disqualified through improper thought, but not actually eating on the third day, but rather having improper thought on the first day to do shechita, having it with intention to eat it on the third day. Rabbi Eliezer lo yachashev ma'avid leh. Now Rabbi Eliezer, he learned it from the problem of retroactive. He didn't like the retroactive disqualification. Fine. What is Rabbi Eliezer going to do with the word lo yachashev? מבא לרבי ינאי, דאמר רבי ינאי, מניין למחשבות שמוציאות זו מזו, שנאמר לא יחשב, לא יראה בו מחשבות אחרות. He needs the word לא יחשב to teach the Rabbi Yanai's teaching, where he says, how do you know that thoughts displace one another? In other words, if someone, the Kohen is doing shechita, and he has a thought that he's going to eat it outside the place, and also a thought that he's going to eat it outside the time, then the first wrong intention displaces the second wrong intention. This is the general rule that pigul only applies, one only gets karet if the thought outside the time is the only problem with it. If one has also another improper thought, then the other improper thought, since it already makes it no good, then the pigul, then the isur karet does not apply. So how do you know that one improper thought will displace the other proper thought of outside of time? As it says, lo yechashev, that means we do not mix the pigul, the improper thought, with other thoughts. If you had a different improper thought, like outside of place, then the thought of outside of time does not make an isur karet. V'Rav Mari matneh amar Rabbi Yanai. There's another teaching of what Rabbi Yanai said, also based on this pasuk, and so Rabbi Eliezer could follow this one also. How do you know that someone who has improper intention regarding sacrificial animals gets lashes? Because the pasuk says lo yechashev, do not have improper intentions. That's a lo ta'aseh. And in general, if someone violates a lo ta'aseh, they deserve lashes. Amar le Rav Asher le Rav Mari, lav she'en bo ma'asehu v'chol lav she'en bo ma'aseh en lo kina lav. Rav Asher challenges this to Rav Mari, but this, although it's a lo ta'aseh, it doesn't have an action. It's only a thought. And the general rule is that any lo ta'aseh that does not have an action, like doing something, like eating chelib, that's an action. If it doesn't have an action, then one does not get lashes. Amar le Rabbi Yehuda amar lav she'en bo ma'aseh lokin alav. Oh no, the author of this statement would follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who says that even a lav she'en bo ma'aseh, one does get lashes, and that's what Rabbi Yanai was learning from this pasuk. Lo yachashev, besides all the other problems, also the person who has the improper thought will also get lashes. Next Mishnah, ze hakelal. Kol hashochet hamekabel hamehalech v'hazorek. לאכול דבר שדרכו לאכול, ולהקטיר דבר שדרכו להקטיר, כזית, חוץ למקומו, פסול ואין בו כרת. חוץ לזמנו, פיגול וחייבין עליו כרת. ובעד שיקריב המתיר כמצוותו. We cited this part of the Mishnah already on the previous daf, and it gives a summary ruling. Anyone who does any of the four basic activities of slaughtering the animal, receiving the blood, walking the blood, or sprinkling it onto the mizbeach, and he has intention to eat something that normally is permitted to eat by the Kohen, or to burn something that is normally burned on the Mizbeach, and he has in mind regarding a kezayit of it, but not less, could be more, and he has in mind that he's going to eat it or burn it, whatever the case is, outside of the place, outside of Yerushalayim, outside of the correct place where it's supposed to be, then the korban is disqualified, although there is no karet. However, if all the same things are true, and he has in mind to eat it or burn it outside of its right time, then that is called pigul, and one is liable to karet. But one only is liable to karet if the one who sacrificed it did everything else properly, the matir, all that which would give atonement, meaning all the blood offerings, rites, all the way through the zirika, have to be done correctly, except for the intention of chutz lizmano. Kesad. What's an example? Kesad karav hamatir kimisvato. What's an example where the one who offers the sacrifice does it properly. In all other ways, it's proper, except for chutz lizmano, and therefore, in these cases, it is pigul. One would get karet. Here's, for example, shachat bishtika, kibel v'halach v'zarak chutz lizmano. Let's say that it did shechita without any wrong intention. Everything was fine regarding the shechita. But then he did kabbalah or halacha or zirika, having in mind that he's going to consume it after the time. Then everything was done properly except the chutz lizmano. So he gets karet. Or sheshachat chutz lizmano v'kibel v'halach v'zarak bishtika. Or the other way around, he did shechita with intention to consume it in the wrong time, even though everything else was done properly. Or sheshachat v'kibel v'halach v'zarak chutz lizmano v'zeu hamakriv hamatir kemisvato. Or if he did shechita, or Kabbalah, or Halacha, or Zirika, any of them, or all of them, chutz lizmano, but otherwise he had no other improper intention, and he didn't skip anything, he did everything correctly. That is someone who offers the korban properly, and there, except that he had wrong intention for time, and this is the case where it's pigul, and he gets karet. Kesad lo karava matir kemisvato. Where do we find the case where he did also another problem, and therefore it will not be pigul, not chayav karet? Shachat chutz limkomo, kibel v'halach v'zarach chutz lizmano, where he did shechita with intention that he will consume it in the wrong place. So that comes first, and that's already a problem. So now it's already pasul. And then afterwards, he does either kabbalah or halacha or zirika, with intention of consuming it outside the time, then that is not karet, because it has another problem. Or sheshachat chutz lizmano, kibel v'halach v'zarach chutz limkomo. Now here's a chidush. It doesn't matter the order. Even if he did shechita first, with having in mind chutz lizmano, if you'd stop it right there, you'd say, oh, look, that's pigul. But we take into account what happens next. After that, he did Kabbalah, Holacha, or Zirika, having in mind chutz limkomo, so that's another disqualification. So that we look at the whole thing together, there is another disqualification, and it doesn't matter that it's after the chutz lizmano. We're going to see there's going to be a machloket about this, right? But according to Tanakama, the order doesn't matter. Or sheshachat v'kibel v'halach v'zarach chutz limkomo, or if he did any of these four things, chutz limkomo, but one of them he also did chutz lizmano, then it doesn't matter. The point is, it doesn't matter which one, it doesn't matter which order. If there is one of them at least is chutz limkomo, then it's not going to be karet. Another category of examples where it's also not going to be karet is if one did shechita on a korban pesach or a korban hatat, having in mind that's going to be a different type of korban, that makes it pasul. So that's another type of pasul. Then even though he also did kabbalah, halacha, zirika, with intention to consume it outside the time, it's not karet because it has another problem. Or even if you switch the order and he did shechita first, having in mind chutz lizmano, at that point you think it would be pigul, but then afterwards he does one of the other sacrificial rites, having in mind a different korban. So then I'm going to do zirika, not for an olah. Then that's a pesul. So therefore the whole thing is no good. Then since it's no good for another reason, no karet. או ששחט וקיבל והלך וזרק דמן שלא לשמן, זהו שלא קרב המתיר כמצוותו. Or if he did shechita or kabbalah or holacha or zirika of the blood, not for the sake of korban pesach or korban katat, but for something else, then although he also has intention in any of them that it will be chutz lizmano, this, since he did not do the korban properly, therefore no karet. Next case, lechol kezayit bachutz kezayit lemachar, kezayit lemachar kezayit bachutz, kechasi zayit bachutz kechasi zayit lemachar, kechasi zayit lemachar kechasi zayit bachutz, pasul ve'en bo karet. So it's not only true if he has in mind the whole animal that he's going to burn in the wrong time and place, but even just one kezayit. He has in mind to eat a kezayit in the wrong time and the wrong place, And also he has in mind a different kezait that he's going to eat it in the wrong time. The Gemara is going to discuss, is this talking about the same avodah? Let's say he does shechita. And while he's doing shechita, he has in mind, I'm going to eat one kezait outside of the right place, and I'm going to eat a kezait in the wrong time. Or is it talking about two different avodot? One kezait is for when he's doing shechita, and another kezait while he's doing kabbalah. Okay, just keep that in mind. But anyway, the point is that it's two kezaits, or the other way around. In time, he has in mind that I'm going to eat a kezait tomorrow, wrong time, and then he thinks I'm going to eat a kezait at the wrong place. Doesn't matter, one way or another. This is called pasul because it includes chutz limkomo, so no karet. And also, if he has in mind a kahasi zayit, he says I'm going to have half of this in the wrong place, and half of it tomorrow, or the other order, half of it tomorrow, half of it in the wrong place. The two halves join together to make a full zayit, and makes it pasul. But because it's not all, because some of it has a problem of bachutz, and not all just the zeman, therefore there is no karet. Anytime there's any other problem, then you're not going to get karet. So this is a chidush that even two halves of a zayit, although one is thinking of different types of intention for each half, they join together to make it pasul. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Zeh Kelal, Kol Shemachshevet Hazeman Kadma LeMachshevet HaMakom, Pigul V'Chayabin Alav Karet. V'Machshevet HaMakom Kadma LeMachshevet HaZeman, Pasul Ve'en Bo Karet. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with the way this was presented above, and he says, no, here is the rule. Anytime the improper intention regarding time comes first, before improper intention of place, it is pigul. Once you did everything correct until the improper intention of time, that's it. It's pigul, chayav karet. And the fact that afterwards you had a different problem, that doesn't count to undo the karet. However, if the improper thought of makom came first, then there's already a pesul, and then if the improper thought regarding time comes after, it's already pasul, and therefore no karet. So the Yehuda thinks that the order matters. Hachamim omrim, Hachamim is tanakama, zeh v'zeh pasul, doesn't matter the order, this way or that way. If there's a pasul anywhere along the way, en bo karet, no karet. Le'echol kachasi zayit, now a new chidush, להקטיר כחסי זית כשר, שאין אכילה והקטרה מצטרפין. If someone has intention, he's going to eat half of his zayit in the wrong way, and he's also going to burn half of a kezayit in the wrong way, then those two things do not join together, because the act of eating and the act of burning are two different prohibitions, two different acts, and therefore those do not come together, and therefore that korban actually will be kasher. It doesn't even become pasul. אמר אילפא, מחלוקת בשתי עבודות, אבל בעבודה אחת דיברה הכל עירוב מחשבות הווה. ורבי יוחנן אמר, אף בעבודה אחת מחלוקת. Ilfa limits the מחלוקת, and he says that Rabbi Yehuda is only arguing on Tanakama if it's two separate avodot. Meaning, let's say first he does shechita, chutz lazman. Now it's going to become pigul, and you're chayav karet, and the next thing avodah he does, any of the next avodot he does, is chutz lamakom, then that's where he applies his stringency that he will get karet, because order matters, and if the order is chutz lazman first, then he gets karet. But that's only true if the next intention of chutz lamakom is for a different avodah. Then we separate them out and we consider which one came first. If zaman is first, he gets karet. But if he has two intentions within one avodah, within shechita, he has in mind, I'm going to have a kezait outside the time and a kezait outside the place. There, this is called mixing of intentions, and we don't combine the mixing of intentions. In other words, one displaces the other. Since it's one avodah, the order doesn't matter within one avodah, and if during that one same avodah he has any intention of outside the place, then he will not get karet. So Ilfa is limiting Rabbi Yehuda's disagreement. Rabbi Yochanan, however, says no. Rabbi Yehuda thinks that even within one avodah, the order matters, and if chutz lazman was first, pigul, one kezait. Chutz hazman, that's it. He gets karet, and the second one, even within the same act of shechita, the thing that he thought about second, will still not undo it, according to the Yehuda. Now we ask, Bishlama le'ilfa, midiresha b'shte avodot, sefa name b'shte avodot. The Mishnah reads better according to Ilfa, since the first cases in the Mishnah were clearly talking about two separate actions, because the first cases say, if one did shechita this way, and then one did Kabbalah that way. So that's clearly talking about two different avodot. Sefa is referring to the part that says, he did a kezait for his man, and a kezait outside of a place. So that kezait and kezait is also referring to two avodot. And so Ilfa has a good reading, because he says the machloket, the entire Mishnah above, is talking about a case of two avodot. And in fact, even the case of kezait and kezait is talking about two avodot, because before that it was talking about the whole animal, and now it's saying, even a kezait and a kezait. Or maybe it's bringing kezait and kezait to introduce the case of Khaski kezait and Khaski kezait. So the Tanakh Kama, everything he said was talking about two avodot, and therefore it makes sense that Rabbi Yehuda comes says, I disagree, and he's disagreeing regarding all those cases of two avodot. But if it was one avodah, there would be no disagreement. So it reads smoothly. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, you have to say that the Mishnah at the beginning is talking about two different avodot, shechita and then Kabbalah. But the case of kezait and kezait is even talking about two kezetot within shechita, within any one avodah, because according to Rabbi Yochanan, the machloket is about that also. So then that means that's included. So is that a good reading? And the answer is in resha b'shte avodot sefa ben avodah achat ben b'shte avodot. Yes, totally fine reading. The resha, where it's talking about he did shechita and then he did this way and then he did Kabbalah that way. Then he did zedikah with this intention. So yes, that's the cases it's talking about, because it's talking about the whole animal. And then when it comes to specify kezait and chasi kezait cases, there it's possible to have a kezait of intention within one avodah. So the language, the reality of the case is appropriate for within one avodah. So yes, no problem to say that the sefa applies, whether it's two avodot, one kezait here and one kezait during avodah, during shechita, one kezait during Kabbalah, or it could be within one avodah. So it's actually a perfectly fine reading. There's no problem for the Rabbi Yochanan. Tenan, Amar Rabbi Yehuda ze hakilal. Im machashevet hazaman kadma lemachshevet hamakom pigul vechayavin alav karet. Bishlamar Rabbi Yochanan haynu tekatane ze hakilal. Ela leilfa mai ze hakilal kashya. And now one more question. When Rabbi Yehuda says this is the ruling, when you say ze hakilal, it means this is a general ruling that applies across the board. And he says, if the thought of outside the time comes first before the thought outside the place, then it is pigul, and one is liable to karet. That makes sense according to Rabbi Yochanan, because that's why he says this is a rule. It's a rule that applies across the board, whether to two different avodot or within the same avodah. So the word ze'akilal makes sense to apply to the Rabbi Yehuda, since it does apply across the board. But according to Ilfa, why is he saying ze'akilal? This is a general rule. The general rule does not apply in all cases. This general rule applies only in two avodot, but within one avodah, the rule doesn't apply. So we should not have used the phrase ze'akilal, and we end that with a challenge against Ilfa. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.